I'd like to go ahead and introduce our speaker today, which is Dr. Stanislav Lhota. Stan, I've been in touch for Stan with years. We've been communicating about forest conservation issues. Stan is lots of things. He's an ecologist, he's a zoologist, but I think in many ways you underscore the fact that he is a very dedicated and serious conservationist. And he's worked in a lot of different interesting areas of the world. He's worked in Sumatra, in Borneo, in the Congo Basin, in Madagascar, works primarily on primates, of course, which have there's a lot of interest in them for conservation. And he's currently now working a lot on this proboscis monkey, as it's called, a very well-known species, and also working in the location which is close to where Indonesia is about to just pick up and move its entire capital, its new national capital, which is going to have all kinds of implications, I would think. But anyway, without further ado, thanks very much, Stan, for coming and talking to us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. That's my first time in Australia, so I'm still excited. Everything is new for me. Every ordinary animal I see is something what I see for the first time of my life. So I spent a little bit less time preparing my lecture than usual. So I only request you, if the time is getting to be very short, please raise a hand and give me a sign that I should finish my talk within, say, 10 or 5 minutes. Yeah. And I will be talking about the translocation of the Indonesian capital city, but I will only talk from one perspective, and that's the perspective of conservation of the proboscis monkey, simply because it's impossible to put more into 45 minutes talk. And the reason why I chose proboscis monkey is that I have been studying the proboscis monkey for quite a long time, since 2006, here in this red circle on east coast of Indonesian Borneo in Balikpapan Bay, and that's where the Indonesian government plans to translocate the capital city. This is how the place looks like from a helicopter and from satellite image. From the satellite image, you can see that actually large areas have already been cleared, deforested, which is one of the excuse for bringing the capital city right here. But you can also see that there is still quite a lot of light green color, which is old growth or primary rainforest, and there is the dark green color, which is the mangrove forest. This is the primary forest, primary rainforest, one of the biggest fragments of the primary rainforest that is still left along the coast of East Kalimantan. It's full of endangered wildlife. I would not name all of them, but actually proboscis monkey is not on the list because proboscis monkeys don't really like living in primary rainforests. They are habitat specialists, and their major habitat looks either like this, a riparian forest along the major rivers, but we don't have big rivers in Balikpapan Bay, or it looks like this, and that is what we have in Balikpapan Bay, the coastal mangroves that actually have quite a lot of resemblance to the mangroves that live here around the cairns. It's still the same phytogeographic zone in terms of the mangrove forest. The mangroves may look like this. That's what you can see in many places, basically like secondary low forest or even shrubland, but they can also look like this. It's the same species, it's Rhizophora apiculata, but where the conditions allow, then there is no strong influence of waves, then there is no history of human logging. The trees can actually grow quite tall, and they can form regular forest. Here in Cairns, I probably don't need to explain what is a mangrove, that is the amphibious forest influenced by tidal waves and so on. So I think I can skip this part. But due to the character of mangroves, due to the very heavy, like the very soft mud, due to difficult accessibility, we are very much limited on this way of exploration mangroves using boats. At the beginning, we were paddling, but because the waterways in Balikpapan Bay have many 100 kilometers, so now we are already using motorboats. And there is one more reason for using boats. Like here, we have the estuarine crocodiles, and it's actually a bit risky place to work. So for both the accessibility and safety reasons, we are mainly limited on working from boats. But the crocodiles are not only a problem for us as researchers, they are also problems for our research subjects, for the proboscis monkeys, because they like to eat them. And proboscis monkeys, they live in mangroves. They have to cross rivers during their daily ranging several times a day. They are excellent swimmers, but they really don't like water. They don't like to swim. And the reason is basically the fear of crocodiles. So whenever they can, instead of swimming, they choose leaping. That's something what is very appealing in natural history documentaries. When the monkeys are crossing the river, they just climb the highest trees and they try to leap as far as they can. Usually they still land in the water and they swim very fast towards the riverbank. The females are leaping with their infants from their bellies. That means that the infants has to sustain the impact of the splash into the water, but then it needs to stay submerged in the water for a few seconds until the female finishes the swim. And that clearly shows that proboscis monkeys are among the few non-aquatic mammals that can control their breath voluntarily. The other example is me, for example. If I cannot control my breath by my will, I would not be able to speak to you now. Proboscis monkeys are very well known for their huge noses. It's the biggest nose among the primates. But again, humans are the second next candidate. But we are behind the proboscis monkeys. But the big noses are mainly observed in males. The females and infants have still quite large noses, biggest than in other primate relatives, but not as enormous as adult males. And it seems that for females and for youngsters, the nose has some kind of function, because when they swim, the nose may possibly help them as a snorkel. For males, it's not real helping, it's more hindering the swimming. And it's very likely that the main function of the nose is the sexual ornamentation. The history might have been that in past the females liked males with longer noses because they are probably better swimmers, they have better snorkels, and they were choosing them. The noses grow bigger generation through generation until they lost the function of swimming tool, and they only became ornament, but not only visual ornaments. They don't only look beautiful, they also sound very handsome. I think this video will not play, but if it plays, it would just show that, that the proboscis monkeys are among the most noisy vocal primates. They emit a lot of calls, and many of the calls are actually emitted through the nose. It's like, wah, 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 wah. It has been studied that actually the pitch of the call is related to the size of the nose. So the bigger nosed males can emit lower pitched calls, and it seems that the smell looks and sounds really very handsome and appealing to the females. But there are other possibilities, other hypotheses that explain the the big size nose of proboscis monkeys, and proboscis monkeys males, and they are related to the feeding ecology because proboscis monkeys feed on young unripe fruits and leaves, and they very much rely on fermentation of the food by bacteria in their forestomach, a bit like cows, and they are also extremely sexually dimorphic. The male is more than double size compared to the female. It has also more than double size stomach and the content of the stomach, and the fermentation is releasing a lot of heat. And it may be that actually one of the functions of the male's nose is to help releasing the excessive heat that is produced by fermenting the content of the enormous stomach. Then I spoke about the ornamentation. This is the picture I sometimes skip that I had the lecture in Indonesia. But the ornamentation of the male is not limited only on the nose. They are also quite bright colored. They have very white patch on their backs. And they have very bright scarlet red penis, which looks erected most of the time, but it's only erected when they are on visible places on the river banks. Once they retreat to the forest to feed or rest, the erection is gone. And the reason why the proboscis monkeys male are so much ornamented is probably related to their social behavior. They are strictly harem-living primates. That's always one adult male with several adult females, and the males don't fight for access to harem, so there are no takeovers, group takeovers that has been described in some other language, for example. The females are actually choosing the males, and because the proboscis monkeys congregate on communal sleeping sites and males have opportunity to display, they are actually able to lure females from other males, and that explains why the males probably need to be so beautiful and so handsome as they are. But if there is a harem system, that means that one male has more than one female, 3, 4, 5, 7 females. That means that some males don't get any female, and these form a bachelor group. So basically the social organization of proboscis monkeys is composed by one male, multi-female units, and of bachelor groups composed of only males. The infants are born brown coated. They have like very distinct brown coloration, and during the time their fur is still dark colored. They are very attractive to all females in the group. So this female is most likely not the mother of the infant. It's one of the aunties that is participating on the infant care, as long as the fur is dark and the face of the infant is blue. Once the infant loses the natal color, the females lose the interest, and the social focus is shifting from adult females to the peer, and the infant spends time with the mother or playing with other youngsters. Proboscis monkeys are arboreal, but they are not strictly arboreal, especially in the mangrove habitat, and especially during the low tide. They go very often to the ground. They actually have partially webbed feet, so they have something like swimming webs on their feet, but maybe the swimming webs are actually not made for swimming. They are more made for walking on the mud. And it's a bit difficult to know why they go to the mud, because they are more shy when they are on the ground. It's more difficult to approach them, but it seems that they may not be strictly vegetarian, and during the low tide they may actually look for some little animal matter. Here, this is one of the cases where we were able to actually see what they eat, and here they are eating inhabiting fungi, fungi that grow from decaying wood, because the sea is bringing a lot of dead wood, and there are many fungi, short-lived fungi, that just grow between the tides on the wood, and this is one of the food of the proboscis monkeys. So they actually get some of their food from the sea as well. They share the habitat with other primates. In general, in Borneo, the mangroves are inhabited by 3 species of primates. One is proboscis monkey, other is silvered langur, but in Balikpapan Bay, the silvered langur are like on the edge of extinction. There are only few remaining groups, and we believe that it's because there is a very broad niche overlap between proboscis monkeys and silvered langurs, and because the habitat is now isolated, it's being degraded, it's being fragmented, there is probably not enough ecological space for 2 primates with highly overlapping ecological niches. And in this case, the proboscis monkeys seems to be winning the fight. The silvered langurs are losing. But this primate, the long-tailed macaque, has actually very small niche overlap with proboscis monkeys. It's highly omnivorous. It eats young fruits. It can eat very many kinds of leaves, including the mangrove shoots, actually. It can eat a lot of animal matters. It's hunting for crabs, and it seems to do quite well side by side with proboscis monkeys. Most of the time, they just don't interact. If they interact, even though proboscis monkeys is much bigger, it's typically the macaque that is winning the fight, simply because macaque as an omnivore opportunistic species is more aggressive. They have different personality, different nature, and this gives them the advantage in case that there is the real fighting. So that was about the proboscis monkeys. Now, a little bit about us and what we have been doing with proboscis monkeys. As I said, we are doing most of the work from boat, and I would like actually to do a lot of behavioral work because I'm a behavioral scientist, but just for practical reasons, because the place is under threat and we need to do more conservation action. So the focus of our work is actually more on the population ecology and on the habitat monitoring and assessment of the monkeys. This was our first campsite in 2007, if I'm not wrong. This was like very early life during the proboscis monkeys survey. And the proboscis monkey surveys are actually not very difficult. The proboscis monkeys behavioral studies are extremely difficult because following them in the mud, in the low and high tide, without being eaten by crocodiles, it's a very risky business. For me, the main problem is like if our students or assistants are eaten by crocodile, because if I'm eaten by crocodile, I'm okay because I'm eaten. But if someone of my team is eaten, I would probably have troubles till the end of my life. So we are very, very careful with doing behavioral studies, but the population is very easy because they have what is called river refuging behavior. To sleep, most of proboscis monkeys groups just congregate on highly visible places, high trees, tall trees, close to the riverbanks. We still don't really know why they do it, but the very possible reason is that they do it to avoid mosquitoes, because the mosquitoes are carrying malaria. The malaria is infectious to the monkeys, and they probably look for the places that are very windy, very open, and where that are less infested by mosquitoes. And on these places, you can you can quite easily see them. You can quite easily observe them. So you have like 2 hours in the afternoon, a whole night, and like 1 hour in the morning for surveying the population. The night surveys are particularly useful because now we have the thermal cameras. The thermal cameras help a lot, and also because they call at night. As I said, the proboscis monkeys are among the most vocal primates, and they call also very regularly during the night. And because during the night there is like it's easier, they are just sitting on their trees. There are like fewer factors that influence their behavior, fewer disturbances. So when they are very reliably responding to one another. So then one male starts calling, it's very likely that the other males will respond, and you would be able to count how many of them there are. Very good. It was very good to study them during the New Year's Eve night because they also respond to fireworks. Okay, so now I guess yeah, this is the proper button. So we started doing the surveys in 2007. It's been like 15 years. And at the beginning, we only choose one area, the area which is within the administrative limits of the Balikpapan city. And we try to locate every single group of proboscis monkeys that live here. And then we extrapolate the results for the rest of the bay. Oops. And it seems, if I find the proper button, yes, it seemed to us that the population was like extremely large. It was one of very few populations, very few known populations that counted more than 1,000 individuals. It was like 5% of the known world population of proboscis monkeys. The word known is very important because most populations of the species are still unknown and uncounted. But in any way, the populations seem to be like extremely important, and we stayed working with them and following them. We tried to model what is going to happen with the population over next decades, and it did not really sound very optimistic because the model, which is shown here with the arrow, predicted that the population is going to steeply decline and that there is a quite high risk of extinction within next 44 years. And this was the first moment we started contacting politicians and media. The media, of course, made the story more dramatic. So it was like within 14 years, the population will be definitely extinct. But that's what media do, and it helped. So the population became like the focus of attention of politicians, of the local government, and it was not that easy anymore to just leave it gone extinct. Unfortunately, the model was wrong. We continued surveying the same segment of population every 5 years. And here you can see how many groups we found on every river, because there are many rivers. And within the rivers, the numbers extremely fluctuate because proboscis monkeys are not territorial. They have huge home ranges and they can move from river to river. So you can find them every year on a different place. But the total number of the proboscis monkeys actually remained quite stable, and it was even slightly increasing. So the model was wrong. We were trying to look why the population did not behave as bad as the model predicted. But you probably know that the population viability models are typically given to students to do their thesis because whatever you fill in the model, you will get some kind of results, and nobody will know if the results is right or wrong. But most of the time it's wrong because, of course, if you use junk data and put it into the model, you will get a junk result. And this was one of the junk results, I would say, and it's mainly because of the data on the forest lost. which were based on the situation in 1980s, which was fortunately not a permanent situation. In 1980s, the forests in Borneo were under big troubles. In mangroves, we had the large-scale conversion of mangroves into shrimp and fish farms. It was like a worldwide problem at the time, and we were losing like 4% of mangroves every year. So it was like enormous rate of deforestation. And also it was the period that then El Nino started being very serious. And in 1980s and 1990s, we lost the huge areas of the forest due to forest fires. And even though mangroves do not burn, I will show later that the proboscis monkeys are also dependent on other types of the forest. So this was basically what we expected in the model, but fortunately the reality turned to be very different. The shrimp farming in most areas bankrupt. Not every coast, not every mangrove is suitable for developing shrimp farms. Many of the fishermen bankrupt. They just discovered that the business is not as good as they dreamed. And then we started the conservation activities, and shrimp farms were most of the time illegal. So now you have something which is not really lucrative business. You are going to lose all your money, and you are even going to get to prison. So then the farms, most of the farms have been abandoned, and now they are regenerating with the new mangroves. And with forest fires, fortunately, the conservation agencies start doing something. And after the very catastrophic forest fires in 1998, many environmental NGOs started considering forest fires as a major threat that needs to be handled. And in Balikpapan Bay, I believe that our partner organization, Pro Natura, does a very good job in preventing forest fires or extinguishing them very early since the fires are detected. This is the fire break that they were making. But this would look like a nice scenario because most of the threats we expected were much less serious and less threatening than we feared. But there are also like the threats and issues that we did not expect. And this is one of them. The trees where the proboscis monkeys lived are dying. And they are like dying in large scale, and they are dying because of the proboscis monkeys, because the proboscis monkeys feed on them. This is how the situation works, and you can actually see that the mangroves is surrounded by basically degraded, unusable habitat that has been cleared usually by land speculators, and it's being gradually converted into housing and industry. And what is left for the proboscis monkeys is mangroves. And it seems that once the proboscis monkeys are isolated in small patches of the mangroves, and they feed all the time from the same trees, so the trees just don't sustain the pressure. And this is something what has been described earlier in Lhota in South Kalimantan, where most of the forests within the nature reserve were converted into rice fields. And following that, the proboscis monkeys concentrated their feeding on narrow strip along the riverbank, edge of the island, to the degree that the trees died, and then the monkeys died, and the population completely crashed. In Balikpapan Bay, in the areas where trees dying, it went to the point when people were finding dead monkeys floating on the river, probably dying of starvation. But fortunately, in our case, the nature found their way, because under the dying trees, under the dying Soneratia trees, there was a new species of trees growing, Avicennia alba, and the proboscis monkeys eat on fruits of Avicennia alba. By eating fruits, they don't kill the tree. So the population is still there. They change the feeding behavior. They decrease the reproductive rate, so they have longer intervals. The number of monkeys decreased, but they survive. But that was one of the stimuli why we started studying feeding ecology of proboscis monkeys, because it's obviously one of the major determinants of their survival. And they feed on two things: young leaves and unripe fruits. And studying feeding ecology in mangroves is really very easy, because the mangroves have very low diversity of flora. You can relatively easily sample most of the species of plants that live in the mangroves, what we did. I would say that if I simplify it, most of these species can be divided just into two groups. One is the true mangroves, the mangroves that live in the intertidal zone that are regularly submerged into the sea, and one is the associate species, those that are growing on mangroves only marginally, most of the time without influence of seawater. And these two types of plants have very different chemical, nutritional composition. One difference is the content of salt, which is obvious. The true mangroves have higher content of salt, which is not good for primates, but the proboscis monkeys can deal with the salt. They can drink salt water from the sea. So they somehow do that. But the other issue, and that's more important, is the protein or ratio to the crude protein to the fiber. And that's one of the major determinants of feeding or not feeding of columbine monkeys. And the mangrove associate trees, those plants that do not grow right under the influence of the tidal waters, they have actually much more favorable ratio of proteins to fiber, and also the total amount of protein is higher. There are very few trees in mangroves, in the mangrove swamp, that have a favorable ratio of protein to fiber, and these are the trees that are dying. This is Sonerati alba. You can see the proboscis monkeys don't actually eat the old leaves of Sonerati alba, but they very much target every single young shoot. And if they go every day feeding on the same trees, because there is nowhere else to go, after several years the trees just die because they cannot grow new leaves. So now we know that the most important feeding resources of proboscis monkeys are found at the edge of their habitat, which is a problem, because this is how deforestation in Balikpapan Bay looks like. The rate of deforestation is actually quite low. It's less than 1% a year, which is quite good in Indonesia, but it goes from the edge of the habitat, from the dry land toward the mangrove swamp. That means that the most important feeding resources are lost first, and then the monkeys are basically left with the habitat, which is very, very inhospitable for them. These are the threats that we have to face, and the problem again is that the threats are multiple. It's not like a single threat, it's multiple threats: coal mining, charcoal production, industrialization, urban development, and it's very difficult to focus the single threats. So we try to identify the main drivers. We do the monitoring of the proboscis monkeys habitat on the boats every month, so we know actually who is responsible for loss of every patch of the mangrove forest. It's not just a satellite imagery, so we know why, for what reasons the mangrove is being cleared. You can see that agriculture still has the aquaculture, the shrimp farming still has some effect, but it's mainly during the beginning of the monitoring period. And what is lost is mainly the mangrove forest, true mangrove forest that is shown in blue color. It's not a big disaster for the monkeys. But then you have the development of palm oil plantations that took much more of the proboscis monkey habitat, and I mainly took the habitat which contains most of the food resources, simply because that's the area where you can grow the palm. And then you have the industrial development. Industrial development is a big new issue in Indonesia. Industry is being basically developed along the coast and along the major rivers where the oceanic ships can go. And for the animals that are basically coastal and riverside specialists, this is a big problem. So now, instead of facing shrimp farming and forest fires, we face an entirely different set of the threats. We have palm oil plantations and we have industrial development. But then we look in more details into the industry. More than half of the industry is actually processing the palm oil. So we can basically reduce the threats to the proboscis monkeys until very recently to one threat, and that's palm oil. It's good to say in Australia, because Australia was the country that actually started the international campaign against palm oil. The campaign was extremely successful. It led to a change of legislation in European Union, which is one of the two major importers of palm oil, and it led to very significant change in behavior of palm oil companies. So thank you for that. But now the monkeys live in the middle of industrial area. Even before the plan of translocating the capital city, the monkeys already live surrounded by cities and surrounded by industry. Not only in Balikpapan, also elsewhere. Some cities actually make their green propaganda on having habitat for proboscis monkeys. This is Tarakan. Tarakan is promoted as one of the most environmental friendly city because it allocates part of its space for conservation of proboscis monkeys. If you see the place from the air, it's just a tiny patch of the mangroves. The monkeys are badly starving. They are socially very unhealthy. It's definitely how conservation should look like. But the monkeys try to adapt living side by side with people. Here it seems that they drink the water from a mangrove pool, and they can drink water from a mangrove pool, but actually what they do here is drinking wastewater from a tofu factory. So if you like tofu, this is how tofu is being produced. It's one of the most disgusting places I've ever seen. Hot, smelly, humid, with a lot of organic waste, but the organic waste contain a lot of protein, and the monkeys came very regularly to drink the waste. If there are no trees, they use power lines to move around, which is dangerous not only for the monkeys but also for the people, because if you have been in Indonesia, you can see that everything is built of wood, and houses are just next to one another. So if there is a fire, the whole quarter burns. And I would say that the proboscis monkeys rather slowly die in the Indonesian cities rather than flourish and survive. The main problem is that their habitat requirements are very similar to habitat requirements of people. So wherever proboscis monkeys live, the area is very suitable for economic development. And if we are very strict and if we strictly use the IUCN release criteria, which I don't like, they should probably be classified as the critical endangered species, because they are one of the fastest disappearing mammals in Borneo. And that's going to be worse because the spatial planning is changing. This is like a very good example of greenwashing in spatial planning in Balikpapan city, because Balikpapan is very much building their propaganda on sparing 50% of their land for conservation purposes. But you can see that this was the situation when I arrived, when most of the proboscis monkey habitat was actually covered with forest. Here, the green color is actually shifting from the proboscis monkeys habitat along the coast into parks and roadsides, And here, actually, to get more industry and maintain 50%, Balikpapan literally stole part of the land from the neighboring district in order to still have 50% of the area covered with forest. And that's where the new capital city came. In this situation, in 2019, Indonesia decided to move the capital city from Jakarta to the area of Balikpapan Bay, next to the Balikpapan city. It will be the best city in the world. It will be green. It will be completely sustainable. It will not harm any wildlife at all. And it will be like the achievement that nobody ever did before. Only Indonesia can do it now. This is the real situation. The first year after announcement, or second year, third year, after announcement of the new capital city. This is the road that is going to connect the new capital city with Balikpapan. And this was all proboscis monkey habitat and other wildlife habitat. And the three colors show different periods of time. The white color is the deforestation within 20 years before announcement of the capital city. The gray color shows 2 years after announcement of the capital city, and the red color shows the next 2 months. So you just say that there is like exponential increase in the rate of deforestation after the capital city has been announced. And nobody is really doing anything to keep this sustainable. So that at this moment, we decided that we really need to know the whole population of proboscis monkeys, and we have to count every single group. I will maybe skip the technical details. So it's just something what took us more than 2 years to accomplish. And maybe the most important thing is that we found the total population size of almost 4,000 proboscis monkeys. So it's like a huge population that is now being impacted by the development of the capital city. And even though we did like the full census for the first time, we have been monitoring that one segment of the population for last 15 years. And you can see that at the beginning, actually the numbers were at like increasing trend. It's not statistically significant, so we still say that the population has been stable. But after the announcement of the capital city, this is the first time we actually saw a decline in the population size within Balikpapan area, and that's very likely connected to habitat loss that has been speeded up by the capital city development. The habitat loss, this is like the recent map that looks almost same as the map I have shown before, but maybe you may notice that beside the deforestation, the red and orange color, there is a little bit of green color as well. And that's very important because habitat change has 2 components. It's habitat loss, but also habitat regeneration. The more habitat you have lost, the better space, the more space for regain some of it. And when we model the process of habitat change in Balikpapan Bay, it very much follows the quadratic function that says that in about 2036, the rate of habitat regeneration should actually compensate for the rate of the ongoing habitat loss. And we should be gaining the proboscis monkey habitat. So that's something very important to keep in mind when we consider the impact of the new capital city, that no deforestation actually still means the negative impact. because the baseline model, the baseline scenario is that we should have a lot of regeneration of the land that has been cleared in past. And what we can see actually is that we probably will not have this very nice shape of the curve, because since 2019 there is a lot of additional forest that is going to be lost. And it's not actually within the limits of the new capital city. Within the limits of the new capital city, there is not that much change. The rate of deforestation remains relatively low, and it's not increasing with time. But just beyond the limits of the new capital city, that's becoming very bad, because the rate of deforestation is the highest ever. There is like more forest loss than any time before. And because within the limits of new capital cities, there are some regulations, and there are some there is some supervision, there is some surveillance by the government. But at the moment the city ends, it's a wild west, and all the land speculators and governments are just doing whatever they want to do. And it's not only about proboscis monkeys. It's just one slide that shows that there are more threatened animals. One interesting thing is the flat-headed cat, which is supposed to live in freshwater swamps and to be entirely terrestrial. In Balikpapan Bay, we have them in mangroves, and they are arboreal because, of course, there are high tides and they need to escape from the tides. And this video has been viral for some time until it has been removed from all social media. You can see that the orangutan is crossing the new highway just behind the signpost that is announcing that this is going to be the green, smart, and sustainable new capital city of Indonesia. But to be fair, the destruction does not start with the announcement of the capital city. There has been a lot of bad things going on before, and all this destruction has happened before 2019. Changing the status of the land into the new capital city is actually also bringing some opportunities for conservation. Strict regulations, more surveillance, more attention. And here the yellow color on the map actually shows the area that has a potential to be restored as proboscis monkey habitat. It's 45 square kilometers, so like the extent of the area is not huge, but most of this land is actually a dryland forest that would support very high density of important food resources for the proboscis monkeys. And if the government just decides to claim this land, which is mainly held by land speculators, and restore it as a wildlife protection area, that would probably very much compensate for the negative impact of the capital city development, at least concerning the proboscis monkeys. So this is basically what we believe the government should do. First of all the proboscis monkeys habitat existing or potential should be protected, declared as a protected area. There's no sign that this is going to happen. There is very strict opposition against even like having this idea. The wildlife protection should be enforced, which is kind of true within the limits of the capital city, but it must be done beyond the limits of the capital city, because the worst impact of the capital city will happen just beyond its borders. The land speculations should be prevented. This is a topic that is being very hotly discussed at the government level and in media, but nothing is changing in the real. Same with habitat connectivity. It's been very much discussed in media. There are many promises by the government, but no real change seen in the field. There should be a buffer zone of non-mangrove forest along the mangroves, because mangroves without the surrounding forests are dead mangroves. There is very strict resistance to even think about this idea, because the forest just beyond mangroves is very lucrative for housing, for industry, for whatever, and there is very, very strict resistance of the governments against raising this issue. The water reservoirs, dams, the capital city will need a lot of water. The dams should not be built in mangroves. Fortunately, the first dam that they are building is not really built in mangroves, not for environmental concerns, it just happens like that. The next and the biggest dam will probably destroy a lot of primary rainforest, not the proboscis monkey habitat, but the proboscis, but the upland forest in the higher watershed will be largely flooded by huge dam, and it will be presented as a conservation project. And then, of course, the habitat that has been destroyed should be restored. Nobody is talking about it. Nobody is doing anything to start any kind of restoration. So, what can be done in order to improve the situation and to turn the green, smart, and sustainable propaganda into something more real? Obviously, the things that works best is publicity. This is the example of the connecting road that I showed on one of the previous slides. At the moment, the case was exposed in Monga Bay. The rate of deforestation declined very steeply. In short term, now it's rising again, but it just shows that you need a lot of media exposure, and again and again and again, and the things needs to be discussed, because the impact of publicity is very strong, but it's also very short term. It's not long lasting. And this is my last slide, because I used to end this presentation with a notion on ecotourism. We had an ecotourism program to not just to earn the money, it was more to earn awareness, to show people what is there in the Balikpapan Bay, to show them the mangroves, to show them the proboscis monkeys. Now, because conservation is becoming politically very sensitive issue, we don't do the ecotourism anymore. But if you write me on this email, I can always help to organize private tours for you, so you can see on your own eyes what I've been talking about today. Thank you for your attention.